I'm Ellie Turner. I'm a director with 60 Decibels, and I'm joined today by my colleague Lieu, who leads a lot of our product innovation work and collaborates closely with a number of our investor clients who are really transforming how impact data is used. And we are both thrilled to be hosting this conversation with two of our partners who are really both raising the bar in how they use customer data in their day-to-day operations. At 60 Decibels, hopefully everyone knows who we are and what we do. You're familiar with our work, but we're known for delivering clean, real-time impact data grounded in the voices of end beneficiaries. And if you know our reports, if you've seen one of them, you know that they generally do two things, right? First, they measure the social impact that an enterprise is having on people's lives. So how products and service are changing and having an impact. And second, but equally important, is they deliver really valuable customer intelligence, right? They surface what is driving customer loyalty, when customers are facing challenges, and where there are opportunities to improve. And so we always see businesses taking these reports and making real management decisions based on what they hear from their customers. This combination of social impact and customer experience is really powerful. It's often really tightly linked, right? Because if customers are experiencing a positive impact, they're more likely to be loyal to your business, and your business is more likely to grow, right? One of our goals today is to highlight how different partners are using this kind of data, not just for impact reporting to prove their impact, but also to improve performance and to do other things as well. So what can you expect from today's session? We're going to get two real-world examples of how organizations are using customer insights at two different levels of decision-making. We're going to start with the entrepreneur perspective. So we have Donal Connelly from d.light, which is a provider of solar home systems, appliances, and lanterns for low-income families worldwide. He's going to share how customer insights are helping to shape how they run and grow their business. We've had the pleasure of working with d.light many times on studies over the years. And then we're going to zoom out to the investor level and have Sally Walkerman from the Small Foundation talk about how they're embedding customer voice into how they think about and manage their investment portfolio. And we really want to keep the format engaging for you today. So again, if you know 60 Decibels, you know we really love charts, but we have prepared for you a zero chart, zero slide format today. There's going to be no presentations. We're going to do a podcast style interview session. So Lieu is going to interview Donal first for about 15 minutes, podcast style, and then go over to Sally. And then after that, we will have a Q&A. So if you have questions, we really encourage them. But I want to just give you some specific instructions because this tends to confuse people. There are two boxes at the bottom of your screen. One is the chat box. We really encourage you to use this box to introduce yourself. You can comment. Whatever you say there is going to go to the whole group. We're really big into chat boxes during Zoom meetings at 60 Decibels, so please engage. But if you have a question that you want answered during the Q&A, please put it in the Q&A box, which is separate. That is where we will be reading the questions out from at the end. So with that, that is all I have to say. I'm going to turn it over to Lieu, who's going to take us through the first conversation.
All right. Thank you so much, Ellie. I'm very excited. I've never been a podcast host, so this is really a first for me. Let's dive into it and start with the conversation with Donal. Maybe Donal, you could start before you answer my first question to just say a few more words about yourself and about your organization. We would love to hear more about the latest. As Ellie said, we worked a lot with you guys in the past few years, and I've had a chat recently with one of your colleagues, and it was just really interesting to hear the many ways in which you guys are using customer data. And so it'd be great if you could start by telling us how you're collecting this data and how you're using it, and then we can start from there.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Louis. So quickly about d.light. So as you heard, we are trying to transform lives with sustainable products. Initially, that meant solar, and we start out with very small solar lanterns. Now we do a whole range of different products from smartphones to bigger solar home systems and inverter products and clean cooking, TVs, fridges. We've kind of got quite a range. So my role at d.light, and this will come more relevant as we go. My role is I'm in charge of credit, and part of the the mission of d.light is to make, obviously we're trying to solve SDG 7, make universal access to energy a reality. And the key to that is really affordability. And to do solar at scale, it needs to be affordable. So we sell our most of our product on credit, on finance. So customers will pay a deposit and then repay over the next several months or even years. So to get into what your question was around customer data, we are quite a data first kind of organization. We'd break it down to sort of 5 types of customer data that we deal with. When I was thinking about this, we have kind of repayment data that is coming directly from a customer that we then match to their account, and we analyze it in lots of different ways. So that's how much did you pay? How fast have you been paying? Have you been paying well and then stopped? We have a lot of analysis on that data stream. Then there's kind of activity data. Did you call us? Did we call you? Did you come to a service center? Did you engage with the app? Were you reachable? Are our SMSs going through? All of this kind of activity data. And then one step deeper than that is whenever we have a touch point with a customer, we have pre-configured a lot of what we call internally dispositions. So when we reach out to you and speak to you, we need to know what was happening. So did you have a financial issue? Was there a product issue? What part of the product had the issue? So we kind of go levels below. And then when we see a particular issue evolve, we'll then go another level, which is like survey data, survey and research oriented data, where we will spot an issue and then say, okay, we now need to do a survey with maybe 500 or 1,000 customers that are in a certain category, so that we can see, is this one issue we're seeing actually representative? And then we can go and see from that how big of an issue it is. And then if those have pointed us in a certain direction, our kind of last kind of category of data is when we go into the field and do interviews, and we would sit with customers and they would take us through the problems they've been having, or the way they're using the product, or the feedback they'll have on a particular process. So we get a lot of complaints, we get a lot of very engaged customers that want to tell us exactly what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And all of that type of data all comes through, I would say, 2 kind of ways in which we collect it. One is called Atlas. So we have it's a proprietary software that we have that's a loan management system, a customer management system, it tracks and schedules out all of our SMSs. It hosts our apps. So it's the sort of the nervous system of the company. And then on top of Atlas, we have Tableau. Tableau is basically for our insights and visualizations. So using those kind of tools, we then are able to slice and dice all that different types of data into the kind of insights that we need.
That's amazing. It's thank you for the overview. It's definitely a lot of data. And I'm wondering, yeah, it must be sometimes difficult to navigate and to get access to, to the right data to make the right decision. And talking about this, I think it would be great to make it a bit more concrete. Do you think you could share like a specific example about, maybe something that you change in the way you're delivering your service, or even in the design of the product, or I don't know, something you change based on that data that you gathered, and
Yeah.
and the kind of change, the kind of results you saw over time?
Yeah, I can give you maybe 2 examples. Maybe one was around a product. So we recently launched a new product. We call it the T100R. It's like a torch that's very portable, and it has lights, it has a radio, it has a small solar panel so that you can charge it on the go. And we had done a lot of pre kind of market testing, but you're always kind of limited to how big those testing can be. We launched the product, and we discovered quite quickly, we got a lot of feedback from customers that in more remote areas, the radio portion wasn't so strong, and that our initial targeted kind of testing had maybe not gotten out into the really, really remote parts of Tanzania and Kenya to test this radio feature that's built in to its kind of extremity. So we quickly then kind of went through that. We saw the data. Okay, we've had more returns on this product in our kind of activity data. We then did a survey and worked through, okay, it's the radio. And then that has then gone back through to our China team to say, okay, we need to improve this product. So we've added like one of the extending radio antennas that will improve the radio. So we then will then look to improve the product so that we can kind of address that challenge. But that kind of originates and comes back from our customers. The other types of things we change, and we change quite a lot, is just processes. So another good example is we saw actually in Uganda our 90-day performance is a kind of a key benchmark. How are people doing after 3 months with the product? It was beginning to slide and come down. And then when we did surveys with customers, well, what's kind of going on? We understood that there were certain aspects that hadn't been as clear in our onboarding process. So we beefed up our process. There were more touch points, more outbound calls, better SMSs, so that we could be more confident that the customers have clear expectations. They know what to do, where to go, how to make payments. So those kind of processes are always a kind of an improvement cycle using the customer data that we get. And we use the sort of repayment data to lead into, oh, this might need a survey. And then the insights we'd get from a survey will then get fed back into a process improvement.
Amazing. I mean, it really, I think, yeah, it lands with the conversation I had with your colleague. It's one of the things that really impresses me in your business is really to see how, yeah, how embedded this customer feedback is in your operations, how agile you are in adjusting. I think it's wonderful. And I guess, to start zooming out a bit, and preparing the conversation we're gonna have with Sally afterwards, I guess the next question for me is, you've talked a lot about, how this data is helping you to enhance your operation, enhance your commercial performance. How do you think about using this data to understand, enhance, show the kind of social impact you have through your product?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, yeah, like you say, we are kind of a commercial, profitable company, while at the same time mission driven, and like our impact is kind of the reason why we're here. It's the mission that brings us all together. So we sort of see those two things as hand in hand, being kind of commercially viable and profitable, as well as that enabling us to drive the mission. Um, so yeah, I guess we would use our impact numbers. So as of now, I think it's about 206 million lives have been transformed, and we have like back behind those numbers and those impact numbers, we use data. So internally, we will have again a Tableau dashboard that's based on all those different types of data that tracks very explicitly those numbers day after day, hour after hour. Um, and yeah, we see certainly the as a motivating factor internally that like these impact numbers that we can tangibly touch and feel, and we can kind of confidently stand up and defend. Yeah, it certainly helps with internal morale. It helps with investors. It helps with the team. So I do think in terms of how we talk about the numbers, we embed them into our slides. We make a big point at every meeting. There'll be one of the first slides on every deck. This is how many lives we have transformed. This is how much like kids get to study later into the night because of d.light products. This is how much CO2 we've offset. So we have clear targets and impact areas. and we try to, as much as we can anyway, bring that into our day to day so that the kind of the chaos of our day-to-day operations still get rooted in that impact that we're trying to have.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's super interesting. I mean, I guess the last question I have for you is like a lot of the examples you mentioned are sometimes considered to be, I would say, operational metrics. You know, you talked about CO2, which is derived from, I imagine the number of products you sell, and how long they've been used, et cetera, et cetera. Um, you know. Is there a way that you're finding to get all of this data that you get from customers, which is like, from the voices of your customers, that, as you say, can be used as simple operational feedback, but is there a way that you channel this kind of customer voices that's not purely an operational hard metric? Is there a way for you to channel that to investors?
Yeah, so that definitely it's a harder challenge. Um, Generally, how we approach it is often through kind of video and story, where certainly when you mention investors, I'm in charge of credit. Anytime we're dealing with investors, it's very numerical. They want to know repayment rates, they want to know default rates. Our investors are commercial entities for the most part. They want to return a profit. But it's not lost on them. We will lead with the impact, and um, they can see very clearly that the impacts are there, the stories are there. So you'll see on our website stories of change, stories of impact. Often, I would say through video, where there's really so many different customers' lives that we have impacted that we every, I would say, year we will update and refresh some of these kind of stories that we'll tell. Um, and I think nowadays most people that are investing in D-Light, they know D-Light, they've heard of us, they'll have seen something before. So they'll have seen our website, they'll know some of the background and the stories. So usually from my perspective, it often too quickly gets into the numbers and gets into the commercial side of it. But yeah, we're quite lucky in that sense that we have this wealth of kind of voice of customer um, library of data that we can share. If it's kind of a story in a video, it can speak to a figure and a statistic in a more human way. But yeah, I think a lot of the time our investors are also impact investors or mission driven. So we will usually agree that the mission is crucial, and that they're kind of coming, and the table stakes are, yes, we want to continue and maintain and amplify the mission. Um,
Amazing.
so it's kind of it goes hand in hand, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering all my questions. I think we're at time, and it's time to talk to
I
Sally.
have
Thank
one
you so
more
much, Donal.
question.
There you go.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna, yeah, and just insert myself into your podcast with one more question for Donal. I mean, what you're describing in terms of data systems feels really advanced, right? And we work with a lot of companies that are sort of earlier stage and might be in the audience today, and recognizing that, you said you've reached 200 million people, and so D.light is pretty mature. Could you give us a little bit of insight into like your journey as the company grew? Like at what stage did you become so advanced in your usage of data? I mean, you have a proprietary software system, but give us a sense of like when that became how you operated and how that grew. Was it organic? What was the growth process like in terms of your use of data?
Yeah, great question, because there's actually very clear sort of stages. So D-Light started out, I think we're 18 years now. The two founders, Najib and Sam, in college created products. So they were very much a product company, and they wanted to solve universal access to energy with cool products. So for the first sort of 7 years, we were selling products to other distributors who would go out and sell our products in the last mile. And at that point, we didn't need such sophisticated data and systems. The big then unlock was we then actually said to reach scale, we have to do more of the distribution. The types of partners we were using, they weren't going everywhere. They were staying in the city. They weren't kind of expanding as far. So as we built out the second stage of the company, which was then the distribution, the last mile distribution, we then needed a system by which we would track it. So that was sort of the basic level. And then the third level, when we discovered in sort of 2017, 2018, to really reach scale, we need to go to this pay-go model. And with a pay-go model, that will then unlock the affordability of these products. At that point, then we realized, oh, we need to then track the loans, we need to track the customers, we need to track their contact details. So we had to build all of this sophisticated data and software to support the pivots and the additional business models that we grew into. So yeah, for sure, we did not start on day one with all of this. And I think it's only really been in the last maybe 3 or 4 years where we've hired very good team. We've got a great software team, a great data team, and they've cleaned up like a data warehouse and are able to build on top of it. But it's only, yeah, as you say, once we've reached maturity that that kind of advanced data analytics has come to the fore.
Thanks. I think that context makes a lot of sense, but it's really great to give, earlier stage companies something to aspire to and to think about how to chart that long-term vision. So thank you for that. Now I think we're past time. That's my fault, but I'll turn it back over to Lieu, and we can switch gears and zoom out a little bit and get some investor perspective on this from Sally.
Yeah, I mean, Sally, like before you answer my first question, it would be great to hear a few more words about you and the foundation. You guys do a lot of work that's very diverse, so it would be great to remind us what the foundation is about. And yeah, I mean, we've heard from Donal about how they're using this data, this customer data to improve their operations. We've had many conversations before, Sally, you and I, about the range of data that you yourself have to deal with, right? Like if you look about the diversity of your portfolio and the type of organizations and sectors and geographies and so on and so forth. And it would be great to hear from you about what's your approach to customer data. Donald seems to say that very quickly in the conversation. It tends to go to operational metrics, hard metrics, because we're doing investment. It would be great to hear what your thought on that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So I'm Sally Walkerman. I'm the Impact Management and Learning Director at Small Foundation. And for those who don't know, so Small Foundation is an investor and a philanthropic supporter of effectively the ecosystem for rural businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're interested in finance flows. We're interested in changing the way that finance moves into that MSME ecosystem and how that generates impact for people who live in rural areas and who are experiencing poverty. There are a lot of different ways that we work, and Small Foundation is philanthropically funded, so we are able to we have a lot of flexibility. We are able to kind of chart our own course and make our own investment strategy. So that comes with kind of that burden of figuring out, well, what do we do and what don't we do? And we have a system change strategy that gives us direction on those the pieces that we work on. In broad brush, we have an investment portfolio. We work with local funds, local financial institutions. We work with TA providers, technical assistance providers. We work in the agricultural sector, as well as kind of outside of that, but still with a view to businesses that impact rural economies. So that can be logistics and other things, and a lot around finance. And then our other side of the portfolio is networks and associations and improving the ability of different actors to come together and collaborate. That has kind of a whole different methodology around how do we understand feedback and how do we understand impact. So I'm going to focus on the investment side today, but if there are questions about the networks and collaboration side. I mean, there is a whole kind of member, participant, customer feedback angle there, but we're just for clarity, we're just going to primarily focus on the investments. Mostly the way that we use customer feedback is to figure out what questions we should be asking of our partners or of organizations that we're looking to potentially partner with. And the reason is that we have a very diverse portfolio. We work across a lot of different types of players. We need to be able to understand quickly what are the key risks and where are the potential opportunities and where can we be most helpful? Because we do have limited resources. We want to be directing our resources as effectively as we can. And so when I stepped into this impact management role, the question was, how do we make better decisions? How do we know when we sit at an investment committee if we should reinvest, keep doing more of the same, or pivot and do something else, or build a portfolio of a different structure, different types of organizations, and figure out how they can work together. So it's really like, how should we be placing our support? When we think about informing the questions to ask, some of the things that kind of tie with what Donal was saying really resonated. So we look at both kind of that customer operational data within partners that we work with. And that can be kind of a leading indicator sometimes for what impact is likely to come. Things like repeat customers. If you don't have repeat customers, that's a clear indicator that there might be a challenge. Things like customer demographics, so things, lending information if it's a financial service provider. So we do look at that kind of commercial operational data as well, and then combine that with the impact data. One of the most interesting things that I find to look at is how do the partners look at their data? And what does it tell them about how they navigate commercial and impact opportunities or trade-offs? Not every business model has commercial impact trade-offs, but many of them do. If we think about we want to reach rural customers, usually there's a higher cost to doing that. Not always, but usually. And so do we go for a higher cost rural client and get more impact, but potentially have less of a margin? Or do we go for more urban, peri-urban customers? It's not always that simple, but that's the question, is how do we navigate these trade-offs? And is Small Foundation kind of on the same page, or at least fully understanding the way that the partner is doing that? So that's one way that we use customer feedback, is really around kind of figuring out what are those questions to ask, what's like the nuance behind that operational data. So the operational data might tell us you don't have a lot of repeat customers. It's not going to tell us why. And that's where 60 decibel studies or other kinds of feedback mechanisms really come in to help kind of inform those dynamics that we would see in the finances. So I'll pause there, Louis, and I'm happy to be guided by you on where to go next.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you, Sally. I mean, again, you mentioned a lot of very concrete use cases, I guess, for looking at this customer data. It's very clear. I think again, it would be great. Obviously you don't have to name names, but if you can give us a real example of how this showed up, whether it is, in a deal or in that you're reviewing, or maybe in one of the current relationships you have with companies you invested in, would be great.
Yeah, sure. So one way that I think we've kind of been interrogating, and we've actually been actively working with 60 decibels on this, is with a financial service product. So financing intermediaries, early stage intermediaries that are providing finance to small businesses. And we had a question about affordability. We want to create a product that's both commercially viable, but also affordable for the intermediaries and their clients. And the question was, we can see, okay, the loans are generally getting repaid at every level. Like, that's great, really good news. But then the question is that good enough for the end client, for that MSME, that entrepreneur? Are they repaying like only just? Are they repaying? Has their business grown enough to repay the loan, but kind of they're just busier and they're just servicing that loan? Or is it having some kind of an improvement in the volumes are creating an improvement in their margins or in the clientele they're able to reach or in their ability to grow their business. And so it's those kinds of questions. Some of that data comes through lending data, but getting that feedback from end clients is really helpful to understanding that, and particularly for a small foundation, because we typically support or work with intermediaries. So we're working with the fund or the fund of funds, or maybe some other intermediary in the system. We're not typically investing in the direct enterprise. And so we don't have that direct contact, which means we have, and we kind of, it's sort of my job to make sure we have as few as possible, but we do have blind spots, or we do sometimes lack those touch points. So that's where the feedback really comes in.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I guess like, you talked a lot about how this customer data helps you kind of paint a more complete picture beyond the metrics that you traditionally have access to when you do an investment. Do you think you could share a bit more about how having this kind of data top of mind is changing your relationship with your investees, and how how you might see some additionality, right? Beyond impact measurements, beyond understanding if the investment is worth it or not, in all of the things that you add to the relationship beyond the investment.
Yeah. I think the thing that customer feedback data gives us that goes beyond these pieces is the surprises. And I'm trying to come up with an example off the top of my head, and I'm not sure I'll be able to. But that's what I like the most about it is when we're kind of crunching numbers, we're usually looking for patterns, we're looking for outliers. Sometimes you get surprised by that stuff. But often, what I find, particularly from the qualitative feedback, is like, oh, I didn't know that's happening. And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And often it's actually because the impact is sort of deeper than I would have expected. So we get these, quotes that say, well, I was able to do 10 things because of this loan. And you're like, wow, we were only expecting one or two. So it's that kind of, I suppose it's fleshing out. Or sometimes, yeah, giving us things that's like, oh, we didn't, sometimes it's not good news, but it's like
Mm.
things that we didn't expect. And because we work on system change, looking for the unexpected is kind of part of the job of tracking impact, and trying to understand what else is happening. Is that unexpected impact good? Well, that's great. If it's having a negative impact, obviously we want to know about that. And so, yeah, it's that unexpected that's just very, very helpful and really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this, Sally. I think we want to make sure that we have time for Q&A, so I'll hand it over back to Ellie.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And thanks, Sally. I mean, the Small Foundation has really helped us to push what our methodology is capable of and to adapt it to do different things and allow the data to be used in different ways. And so we've really valued that thought partnership. Don't forget the Q&A. Put your Q&A in the box. Before we flip to Q&A, just as we're thinking about all these different ways that customer data can be used beyond just impact reporting. Lieu has been working with a lot of the investors that are using Signal, 60 Decibels Impact Intelligence Platform. And Lieu, you were telling me about an example recently of a sort of different way that data is getting used by one of the investors. And I wonder if maybe you could just share that anecdote while people are putting their Q&A in the box.
Yeah, it's true that the Q&A is looking a bit sad. Would love to. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of names that I know in that list of attendees. I'm sure all these people have a lot of interesting things to share, even if it's not a question. But yes, anyways, yes, Ellie, yes, I would love to share about this. I mean, I guess for me, that particular work that we did was interesting because it was further zooming out, and it was not so much looking at the yeah, the relationship between investors and company that we traditionally work in at 60 decibels, right? We traditionally get hired by an investors to help them better understand the companies in which they invest. And that one, it was an exercise where we really mobilized all of the data that we've been collecting in the past few years. And we try to produce insights that were relevant to a meeting that was gathering 12 different fund managers that were gathering to discuss big strategic directions with a common investor that they had, which was a development finance institution. And what was interesting there is that it was kind of challenging, right, to mobilize this data. How do you use all of these testimonies from single people that we've called over the years? How do you turn that into something that's actually useful in that conversation? So what we did is that we found the common points between all of these funds. So for example, they had a geography in common. We identified subsectors, so like, AgTech, for example, was one of them. We identified specific types of companies that we're targeting, were there like bigger companies, smaller companies, were there leveraging tech, as I mentioned. We used a bunch of filters to kind of look at what data that we had was relevant to them. And then we came up with a short list of dozens of companies that were relevant to all of these funds. Actually, some of them were in the portfolio of the 12 funds that I was mentioning. Not all of them, but some of them. And we use this as a basis of conversation to kind of see what were the outcomes, right, reported by the customers of these companies. And it was super interesting. We found relevant trends, things that some things should, as exactly as Sally was saying, like there was some surprises, right? Some assumptions that you make about, for example, the impact of tech, or some of the trade-offs that you can see when you use tech. And yeah, I mean, without getting into too much detail, we liked doing this kind of exercise at 60 decibels. That's kind of the whole point of gathering this data at scale, is to make sure that it can be used by a broad range of stakeholders. And so it was definitely an interesting exercise.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a few questions in the box and a few that actually came in with registration. So I'll start going through those and feel free to keep it coming. The first question is for Sally. There was a question about your definition of customer within your philanthropic work. So could you provide some more clarification on that?
Yeah, it's hard to keep the terminology straight in my mind all the time, but I would try to use the word partner to talk about anyone who has a direct funding relationship with small foundation, and then a customer would be an individual running a business that's working with one of our partners. And there could be multiple layers. Like if we're investing in a fund of funds, then the fund of funds would be the partner. Their funds that they're investing in would be kind of another part of that partnership. And then I'd still call the customer the person who's engaging with that fund. So it's kind of the individual at the end of that chain of finance.
Thanks. Okay, so this is a question that kind of goes back to my question to Donal about how sort of the growth aligns with the data systems. And the question is, are there any relatively simple tools that early stage founders can use to track customer data? And I will open this up to anyone who wants to respond because it's a great question and I'm afraid I do not have an answer. But if anyone in the chat box wants to add in suggestions as well, go for it. But I'll see if any of the panelists have any suggestions that they've seen work for early stage founders.
Yeah, I think maybe there's two parts of it. One, like there's a lot of kind of tech products that could be good for tracking it. Intercom, Zendesk, these are kind of aggregated software tools that will bring in kind of customer data into a centralized place to deal with kind of customer data. I was going to say that, but for the types of businesses I know Sally's investing in that we work with, they aren't really going to be all that useful because most of our customers are deep rural customers in Uganda, in Kenya, Zambia, Tanzania. It's not going to be digitized, a lot of that information. Honestly, for me, the tool that I use the most for customer information is like this. So we're very strong. Every quarter, everyone needs to be in the field. So we would go to the field a lot and speak to customers. So if you're an early stage founder, I honestly, I'm not sure if I can think of a better tool than just going out in conversation with direct customers, writing it down. We try also at d.light when anyone goes to the field, they have to write it up as field notes, and we have a folder where your field notes get stored. Um, Otherwise, no one else can sort of benefit from that experience as well. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know of any great kind of digital tools for trying um, to make sense of that, other than just going out and having conversations, writing it down, and then bringing it back to your team.
Could I just pick up on that that last piece of bringing it back to your team? I think this session is about how we use data, not how we collect it. And so I just love that you mentioned that, because the collection and the making the notes and you put it in your own mind and it changes your own thinking. But I think one of the biggest challenges and kind of biggest um, kind of time consuming parts of using customer data is actually sitting down and talking about it, and someone else going, well, I was at that meeting and I heard it differently, and having those conversations. Or something that we struggle to do but really are trying to implement kind of more systematically, which is to say, okay, we did the research. Now let's combine that with the information that we already had and have that kind of analysis conversation around, like, what's new that we learned, what's different, what do we disagree with, would we disagree between each other? So it's that sense making. I was just going to add one thing. I think this is a tough one around tools, but we are supporting a little piece of research looking at Odoo, which is an open sourced tech tool. So it could be something that's kind of more accessible. And there are yeah, so if you go on our website, you might find a little bit about the research that we're doing there. It's just one small piece, and there are lots of other tools, but just mentioning that in case it's of interest.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, Here's another one for Sally. How can TA best be deployed to fund managers to ensure that SMEs also have the expertise and know-how to deliver on this set of impact objectives?
That's a huge question. We have a whole stream of work around TA, which often is about delivering on commercial objectives as well as impact objectives. And actually, when I first was sort of peeking at the Q&A, and when I first read this question, I thought you were asking about reporting on impact. So how do you provide TA to help make sure that there is kind of expertise and finance available as well, or resources available to actually even just report, which can be a burden. Um, Although we try to make it as light as possible. In terms of implementing impact objectives, I think the main thing is really that company mission. So if we think about Donal's comment on kind of the reason behind d.light is to have impact. And so if you're investing in companies like that, or where there are some funds that we work with where they're focused on kind of basic goods and services. And so they're embedded in, or they're investing at very early stages. And so there's kind of impact embedded in that strategy. Um, so that's one way of kind of lightening the burden of like providing TA to sort of check all these things along the way. But it's it's a big topic, so we could spend a lot more time on that. I'll come back to Ellie.
Thanks. Um, Here's another question. Do we know if customers also find data collection useful, and to what extent? For instance, do they think it is useful in their own operations? I think customers here refers to end customers, but again, it could mean different things to different entities. So I'll see if anyone wants to take that question.
I can speak for it from a very like a customer who's bought a d.light product. Um, often when we do surveys and when we do interviews or focus groups and bring people in, um, it's also maybe touching on this, the last question as well. I'm often surprised at how engaged and excited they are to give feedback. Um, I think there's a kind of a strange situation where a lot of these customers have probably never really interacted with a brand or a company at that kind of level. So when we go and pay for their lunch and they come in and they're told, now we want to hear what you think of this product, and we'll put the product down. I'm always amazed by how they love it, and they quickly get into a very productive kind of brainstorming session. And yeah, it can go two ways. Sometimes it's, oh, this isn't good enough and you need to have this, and they'll list off features that we'd never be able to afford to get into it, but it's great to hear. But I always am surprised at how there's a real appreciation when companies go out and ask how you think, and what would you like to see us do better. So yeah, definitely I do think that there's a I don't know if it's maybe African, but it's like a real sense of, oh, this is a brand or a company that I like. I want to make them better, so I'm happy to give insights. But yeah, I do think it's also important to note that we try to, like, either in some way reward or give back. So we've like a points program. So we'll give the customer points if they've engaged with surveys or taken time out of their day to give us feedback, or lunch or t-shirts or things like that. But yeah, my experience has been overwhelmingly positive, that they like and want to be kind of consulted and feel part of decision making.
I mean, like, I'm not gonna teach this to Ellie, but like at 60 decibels, we don't have the privilege of offering lunches because, as you know, we work on the phone, so it's kind of and actually because of methodologically, it's better not to incentivize people to answer the call to make sure that there's no bias in the way they're answering you. We don't typically provide other sorts of incentives, but sometimes we do. But anyway, most of the time we don't, and we're also seeing that people find it very useful, and are, like the response rates are usually very high. And even when you get, we get like there's a hidden column in the in the notes that are the people that place the calls do, right? Like they give us the answers to all the questions they ask, but then there's like a notes section at the end where they get to share what happened during a call. And when I used to do studies, that was my favorite column to look at, looking at data, because sometimes you do get the surprise of like interesting comments about how, yeah, like I don't know, like you could see that there was a lot of emotion sometimes being brought in these calls, because people share things either because they're happy or they're concerned, etc. But something definitely happens when you talk to people, right? So yeah.
Really
I
peeling back the curtain on
I
the
know.
60 decibels work, but it's true. I mean, it's the reason that it works, right? People love giving feedback. You wouldn't think so, but they really do. All right, we've got one more for Sally here. A lot of your role seems to be tracking and crunching the numbers to uncover these surprise insights, both good and bad, as you mentioned. How much of your role is data analysis versus creative strategy with your partners to address the surprises?
Um, yeah, I suppose, I mean, Small Foundation is a team of, we're almost 20 people now. And so there is a bit of a division of responsibility, but as an organization, the both parts are really important to us. So the number crunching, pattern recognition and kind of trend, looking for trends across our portfolio is something that I would do. Um, but then that sort of the so what question, the so what now what is a really live part of any conversation that we have. And we have teams focused on investments or focused on our network portfolios that would really be hashing out some of these things. It kind of depends on what the insight is, sort of how we would take that forward. So if it's a kind of operational or sort of, customer satisfaction kind of issue, within a particular partner, then that would be hashed out with that particular partner. Often it's kind of more kind of a strategic question, like a higher level piece. And then we might just kind of rethink, well, okay, we'll pivot a bit the way that small foundation supports or invests. It just kind of depends on what the actual insight is.
Great. And then we have one more here, looking for short examples of how insights from quantitative or qualitative data have influenced future customer actions. Donal gave a few of these in your session, but I wonder if we could just open it up to any more sort of short examples of how data has changed decisions or actions.
I actually have a really quick one. If I'll just hog the mic for one more second. I was thinking about this. I looked at a report recently that so full transparency, this actually wasn't one of our partners, but it was a 60 decibels report that someone had shared on one of their partners. But co-op, agricultural co-op, lending and providing other services to farmers. And one of the findings was that the impact was kind of modest for the first couple of years, and then after year 3, it really started to bed in. And I think we all kind of know that if we work in ag, we know, or in many sectors, we know that kind of consistency over multiple years is really important. But to see that in the data, this kind of confirms an assumption more than anything, but to see that in the data made me think, okay, these are loans that people are getting. We really need that finance to be structured at every level in such a way that it supports a long-term relationship with the farmers so that they get to that 3 to 5 years at least. And sometimes there's kind of a disconnection between the loan product, which is like, oh, it's on a seasonal cycle, and the need for that longer term impact.
Awesome, thanks. Sally, I'm going to send one more your way. This came in with the registrations, but there was a question about how data can be used to best contribute toward a stronger, more robust impact investing ecosystem.
Good luck.
You can jump in too, Louis, but I know that Sally does a lot on the investing ecosystem. So.
Ooh. Yeah, I think, I mean, there are so many different ways to answer this question. I think conversations like this one are actually really important, which is to say, we're drowning in data. Is it the right data at the right time? And is it telling us information that informs the decision that's on the table? So I think sharing how we use data, how we kind of sense make it into information that we can actually deploy is really important. And kind of sharing notes and sharing, sort of pooling more data so that we can actually kind of see one company's experience kind of in context. And so some of the work that you guys have been doing with Signal or even with your studies helps a lot, I think, to just kind of place into context, like, are we in the right ballpark? Is it moving in a direction we expect or not? And all those pieces are really important. That's my 1-minute answer.
Thank you. I know we could go on about this forever, and I'll make one last plug for standardized impact metrics being really critical to all of this being possible. That is it on time. Before I wrap up, any last thoughts from the group that you want to share that we haven't touched on?
Maybe
amazing.
one last one.
Yeah.
will, just plug 60 decibels, where I didn't talk about it there because we were kind of talking about our own customer data, but we've obviously engaged with 60 decibels a lot, doing different research projects, different topics. And I will say that even when we're not involved in a project, when a kind of a report comes out about a sort of even if it's a related field that we're not in, we will often use that data internally anyway. So we really value external kind of research parties coming in, doing independent research. And I think to Candace, your question there, it's an issue we face when we do our own research, that there's bias. So we really value when sort of organizations like 60 decibels take that on and It's obviously done at a very high level. The reports are really actionable. So we would have, as soon as a new report would come out, we would quite a lot of teams internally would read through it, see what we can learn from our kind of our competition, our peers, other people. And I think it's a really valuable other source of data that isn't necessarily our own customers that really helps the whole industry kind of move forward. So yeah, definitely big shout out to 60 Decibels. Thanks for these kind of sessions, but also just the work on giving a voice to a lot of the kind of populations that don't always get heard and don't always get their agenda brought to the very top. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Well, thank you so much for that and for your time today. What matters the most to us is when we can see the value that the data brings to organizations and decisions getting made for it. So bringing this full circle, it makes it all worth it. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everyone for joining. You will probably get an email with a video recap, and you'll have our contact information if you want to follow up. But we really appreciate everyone taking the time, and have a good rest of the year. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.